Good morning, YouTube. Just a second while I get Facebook camera set up. Good morning. Once again, as always, this isn't a video you need to watch. It's just something to listen to. The title of today's video is David and Goliath. Relevance for today, what it means for us now, how it affects our lives, the lesson highlighted in the story, all that kind of good stuff. No, the Old Testament isn't gone. It isn't irrelevant. Paul said that all these things were written down for our instruction. So while the old law is done away with, the lessons are not. We have been grafted into that tree of Israel, of the faithful, the nation of the faithful. So we're all pretty much well familiar with the story of Goliath. Young shepherd boy attends the the camp of Saul's army of Israel. There's the giant who's challenging Israel and says, if any of you is man enough to fight and defeat me, we will become your slaves. Goliath representing the Canaanites, I believe, one of those tribes. Nobody in Israel will fight Goliath except for David, just a measly shepherd boy, the youngest son. As he's going, and so then we get kind of into the lesson, and I'll develop the story from there. Part of David being a younger son and being an unlikely character, probably smallish in stature, is God showing that he will use unlikely characters that aren't qualified by the standards of the world. David was not built like a champion. Physically, pound for pound matchup, he was nothing compared to Goliath. But God will use those characters to bring about his plans. As it says later in the Bible, in the New Testament, his power is made perfect and manifest through weakness. This way he shows the power he can bestow. It is not much of a thing to give victory to the strong, but to the weak, it is a different ballgame altogether. Which is why God picks us fools, us downtrodden, us spit out, us bottom class people of the world to preach, to show that the wisdom given to the foolish by him is enough to bring the wise of the world to their knees. So as David is getting ready to confront Goliath, Saul gives him his weapons and armor, his sword. I think it's probably, for the time period, some sort of chainmail or a breastplate. I can't really remember. The story's a little longer than I would want to read for a prefixtural scripture reading. So while they're trying to put the weapons and armor, state-of-the-art technology on David, he tries it on. He, gives the sword a little test probably, and, says, this stuff's not for me. And he takes on Goliath with his sling, a little strap of leather and a rock. This is God showing us that we don't need all the fancy technology and all the ways of the world to get his work done. He's going to give us what we need. He's going to give us the skills we need. He's going to provide the equipment we need to get it done. And that's part of, once again, his miraculous power, showing that through a weak vessel, he can project all this strength. That is not to say, that afterward David didn't, when David became a war captain, he had armor and tools. But to illustrate the point, to elevate David to that point, God used him as a very humble vessel to show his power. It's a pretty simple lesson, but it's big time. And I'm going to get into how it applies to our life pretty soon. I think I'm tying it in throughout the video. David was rewarded with a crown of glory for his obedient faith. Even that faith would probably be borderline reckless to many of the people who were watching. Like, what, dude? You're going to go out against Goliath with a strap of leather and a stone? What are you doing? That's reckless. That's just not even safe. So too are we often, do you not often feel this calling to a reckless faith? Not vaccinating your kids. Big one. Not seeing the doctor for something. And people say, you just say, I'm just not worried about it. God's got me. I'm just not. And people look at you like you're insane. Oh, that's right. That's dangerous. What are you doing? Go see the doctor. That's that, reckless faith. Just, extreme, true faith. Faith without a plan B. Next little paragraph I have here is, one of the points of all this is to show God's amazing power. Said that many times. Goliath, a man of war, a mighty man, a giant, is 10 feet tall, with armor probably neck to knee, was brought low with a sword and spear and javelin, was brought low by a shepherd boy, a strap of leather and a rock. For it says in the midst of this story, David says, this day the Lord will deliver you into my hand. I will strike you down and cut off your head. And then something about feeding his body to the beasts. That all this assembly may know that the Lord saves not with sword and spear. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand. That's what he said to Goliath. See, so you see when I get onto my little pacifism rants, you see that's not very far from what's going on in the scriptures. Goliath, a giant 10 feet tall, arrayed in the full regalia of the world, signifies the giant rich monstrosity of the world we are up against. Like David, we are armed and armored with very little, but with our great faith we can do battle and show all the world, as David says, the power of the God of Israel. The story fits in rather well, I think, also with the teaching of, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you should be able to move this mountain. That ends my outline for today, and I guess I'll just kind of go off with what this all kind of means. For me, I learned a lot about this lesson when I was farming. One big thing about farming is fertility, right? Obviously, the single best way to increase fertility on a long-term, I won't say permanent basis, but on a long-term holistic basis, is to add compost to your soil. I mean, it's dirt. It's wet, generally wet, heavy dirt. To get it shipped in and spread automatically is not cheap by any means. And, I was doing this without debt, without a whole lot of funds. So came time that I had to face the fact that it's like, hey, you either shovel all this manure, you shovel this compost. You get out there with a shovel. That's it, just a shovel. Technology from how many thousands of years ago. And you get out there and you go down to these local farms, the city dump where they have leaf compost, and you get out there with a shovel and you shovel it. And that's the only way this is going to happen. Or, you can pay out for it, which is just expensive. And literally these mountains of compost are like mountains. I mean, they're, some of these piles that I go at will be, 40 feet tall and, 100 feet wide kind of thing. It'll seem like a literal mountain. And when I was first doing this, I simply did not have the discipline, the patience, the ethic to go out there with a shovel and, fill up my truck full of compost and bring it back to the farm and then unload it again onto the field where, it needed to be spread. And so I struggled with it for a while. I wanted to do it, but man, it was just like, it was brutal. It's brutal work. Shoveling is anywhere between, depending on how efficient you are, it's anywhere between 35 minutes and an hour and a half of straight shoveling dirt into a pickup truck. But as I was growing on in faith, I kind of realized, hey, this is like a free gold mine. God has provided this incredible resource that otherwise you got to pay thousands of dollars to get in, and it's free if you just get out there and you give what He gives. You use what He gives you to get it, to make it done. My hands, my back, a shovel, my truck. It doesn't really cost much. But man, those are big piles, right? Almost like a mountain. And it was only as my faith developed and I realized, hey, as long as I stick with it, it's going to get done. You put one foot in front of the other and you keep on going, that 2-foot step turns into a 2,000-mile journey. And I think in our modern age, that can be a tough lesson to accept, where we like instant gratification. We're used to just pressing a button and the thing gets done, and generally done perfectly. So that whole manure shoveling experience for me was, a lesson in these virtues. It was, I felt like David with a shovel going against Goliath with just, which was just the enormous burden, the seeming impossible task of shoveling all this manure. Well, story shortened, I got to the point where no longer was I struggling to do only one truck full of manure a day, but I was doing 2 and sometimes even 3 with relative ease. And it got to the point where it's just like, I just had to basically shut my brain off while I was working. Not really, but just shut off all those negative, oh, I can't do it, oh, this is too hard, oh, blah, 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 blah. Like, nope. God gave me what I need to get the job done, and I'll do it. And I did. So, same goes for you in your life. You probably have some giant obstacles, some things that seem either out of your grasp or may require some sort of miracle or reckless faith to accomplish. And this is where the story of David and Goliath comes in. We're all told we need so many different things to succeed in the world. You need this degree, you need this thing, you need that thing. But God is going to make a way. He's going to use, you might seem like you're in a weak and feckless, ineffectual position, but that's exactly where He gets to work. He gets to show His power to you through your weakness. Because if you had it all figured out, and whatever your goal was happened, you would say, oh, well, I just figured it all out. But see, when you don't have it figured out, when you don't have the resources to achieve it, when it seems like Goliath can't be slain, He's going to arm you with that faith, if you allow Him, and a sling, and, you're going to take down a giant with very little. Same goes for the goal that I kind of see and have for what I would like to do in this world. It seems insurmountable, but I have an example. I have reckless faith, and so even though the mountain seems so high, I'm just going to hack away at it. So, I think it's pretty short and sweet story about David and Goliath. It's a famous story, but quite often, the full depth of it is not discussed. And it's one of my favorite stories. So, I think that's that. Just going to comb the memory banks real quick and see if there's anything else regarding the story that needs to be enlightened upon, but I think is pretty open and shut. Yep, sure is. Well, thanks for listening. Have a blessed day.